Joining me now, Congressman Robert Garcia of California, member of the House Oversight Committee and the Homeland Security Committee, and Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California, ranking member of the Financial Services Committee. Thank you both very much for coming back to the Sunday Show. This is a question for each of you. And Congressman Garcia, since you are not here at the table, I'll go to you first. Trump told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, quote, "If everything's honest, I'd gladly accept the results. If it's not, you have to fight for the right of the country." Why should we take this threat seriously?
Well, because we know that Trump believes this in his heart. He's got an army of MAGA, extreme far-right folks in the Congress and across the country. And he has a derangement about hurting people, hurting democracy, sending a mob in to attack a Capitol, to overthrow our government, wanting to round up migrants from across the country. And so we absolutely should take him on his word. We saw that he actually executed and tried to do horrible things to people across this country in this last term. A lot of folks can say they didn't know or maybe didn't know what to expect from Donald Trump. We can't say that this time. We know what he's going to do, and he must be stopped.
Congresswoman Waters, your reaction to Trump saying, if everything's honest, everything's above board, to his point of view, he'll gladly accept the results of the country, but if not...
Well, first of all, you can't trust anything that Donald Trump has to say. No matter if he loses, he's going to say that it was fraud. He still has not accepted what happened in the last presidential election. And so we have to be very concerned about a former president of the United States talking about attacking his own country, talking about perhaps a bloodbath, talking about perhaps there's going to be trouble. He said it in so many different ways. We should take him seriously. Mm-hmm. This man does not believe in the Constitution. He wants to be a dictator. This is a dangerous human being. And we have to know what our country is going to do to protect us from him.
Well,
yes.
No, yeah. I know you can keep going for this whole hour, Congresswoman, on that. But speaking of the Constitution, Trump says in that time interview that he would not seek to overturn or ignore the Constitution's prohibition on a third term. So the American people believe that. Do you believe that?
No. Absolutely not. As I said, you can't believe anything that Donald Trump has to say. Donald Trump will do any and everything that he can possibly get away with. He does not at all support the Constitution of the United States of America. This is a man who we'd better be careful about. And I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask the Justice Department and I'm going to ask the president to tell us what they're going to do to protect this country against violence if he loses. I want to know about all of those right-wing organizations that he's connected with, who are training up in the hills somewhere and targeting, what communities they're going to attack. We need to know now, given that he's telling us that there's going to be violence if he loses. We need to know what his plan is and how we're going to be protected.
Well, Congressman Garcia, one of the things we know, especially from that Time magazine profile of Trump, it points out that there are 4 separate entities, including the Heritage Foundation's Project 25, that are working behind the scenes to create a government in waiting, complete with Trump loyalists and day one plans to uproot whatever guardrails remain against presidential overreach. Please explain why this isn't hyperbole. This is real.
This is dangerous. And I think what they are preparing is to destroy our democracy, the way we have elections in this country. And the Congresswoman is absolutely correct. Make no mistake, and let's be crystal clear. If Donald Trump gets reelected, there is no doubt that he will try to stay in office beyond his 4-year term. He will destroy this country, our democracy. He'll change the way we run elections. He'll attack secretaries of state, and he'll do everything he can in his power to stay in office. And the country that we know of today, we will no longer have. It's sobering, it's scary, but we have to take it seriously. This is a person that we have to take at his word. And so we have to do everything that we can between now and the election to strengthen, support our local election officials, ask the Department of Justice to be prepared, and most importantly, to reelect, of course, President Biden.
All right, Congresswoman Waters, in the minute that we have left, Donald Trump told Time that he intends to pursue policies that would address what he calls a, quote, definite anti-white feeling in this country. And he says it's a feeling that, quote, can't be allowed. Given the attacks on affirmative action, DEI initiatives, and the grab bag of grievance that critical race theory has become, will that reverse racism narrative work with the American people at the ballot box in November?
One of the things we better know is we cannot chance that it won't work. We know that there are people who are aligned with him, who follow him, who are already practicing what their government is going to be under Trump. Not only are they planning on a civil war if they have to do that, but he's spelling it out specifically how and what they're going to do and how he's going to get revenge, how he's going to attack his enemies, all of these things. And when he talks about race, we know, and I'm going to tell you again today, Donald Trump is a pure racist. And I am worried that the attack is going to be on people of color.
We're going to have to leave this part of the, just when it was getting hot, we're going to have to leave it here. Congresswoman Maxine Waters is sticking around for the hour. Congressman Robert Garcia, as always, thank you very much for coming to the Sunday show.